Today we're going to talk about Will Willimon's sermon, When the Outsiders Become Insiders.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear your first impressions of the sermon after you listened.
Well, I've been listening to Will Willimon a long time. Again, he was the dean of the chapel when I was an undergraduate, and he was in that role for a long time. Yeah, Willimon is an engaging storyteller. I think his style and his rhetoric is usually, is very down to earth, and he reckons with personal stories in ways that can invite you in. And again, having heard him a lot, my ears were prepared for his kind of cadence of preaching. It's kind of when you're used to listening to a certain style of music, you kind of you get the beat and you sort of are familiar with the tune and that sort of thing. This one took on a little more levity to it, given it was starting out on the real kind of divisiveness, or the church's divisiveness on the critical matter of same-sex marriage. So
he also talks about the difference between maintaining healthy boundaries and becoming inhospitable, right?
Yeah.
What's the difference? So what do you think are healthy boundaries for a church body that's seeking to be hospitable?
If you're fortunate enough to live long enough and to live outside of your the world in which you were born into, and experience a level of intimacy with people that we normally don't get. I think you have more of an opportunity to be transformed by other people.
Let's talk for a minute about language.
Mm-hmm.
So in the sermon, Willimon doesn't necessarily lean into terms we often use like stranger, foreigner, words like that.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think it is helpful, unhelpful, something in between to use these kind of strong othering terms in our theology, in our preaching?
Yeah, the question of citizenship and belonging, right? Obviously it's very front and center for us today because we had these past 4 years of just explicit demonization of people who don't hold citizenship. Actually, not just past 4 years. The president before this former one was accused of not being born here, right? Mm-hmm. And so you think things like birthright and citizenship, anything that might suggest that someone doesn't belong, I think we need to be careful. So in scripture, you definitely have words, and they that are not. Whether it's the stranger. I don't know how many times that the word foreigner appears, but you have labels or identifiers for people, clearly based on nationality and other things. But I think where we get in trouble is the hierarchy that follows that. So even saying I'm a Westerner, if I'm outside of the West and they say that's a Westerner, that's generally not a good thing to be called a Westerner. And so I think that's where the human sin comes in, because the minute you identify someone as not from where you are, it as opposed to be an excitement and a joy, it can become yet another rigid boundary that does not afford you to discover humanity in beautiful new ways because of where they're from.
It seems often that gender equality, racial justice, immigration, all these issues often are talked about in isolation. But in our context right now in the United States, do you see any connections between the issues surrounding international immigration and the American Black church experience?
It's a very loaded question because, again, a reckoning with why the Black church, was created and is necessary, and what it did for our humanity is beyond profound. The fact that we remain Christian in this country is, again, a miracle and a work of God, to find our way into this vision of beloved community, given the horrors of that. And in the early formation of the Black church, there and as the Black church became the center of the civil rights movement, um, in the 50s and 60s, uh, there was a broader recognition that we were participating in a global development of people of color, in the quest for their human dignity inside of white supremacy and white domination. So that's a big story. I mean, those are centuries, right? And of course, we have to reckon with the stripping of the land first of the Native Americans and indigenous peoples. Um, and that is history that needs to be addressed. And so the human mind is but so capable of doing the work of understanding, both like theodicy and evil, right? And so I'm not saying it's too much to ask to see how these two realities intersect, but in a way it is. I know most recently, I didn't hear the term intersectionality until maybe last 2 summers ago, that people were starting to grapple with intersectionality as a disciplinary thought process. And that's good, that's wonderful, and important. I think sometimes, again, we have a good way of shaming others who, if I choose a discipline like African American studies, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not concerned about the other studies or other disciplines. It's just, where a person's heart may lean. So what I feel like is really tremendous is when I hear someone like a historian, Tim Tyson, talk about his work as a white man of deconstructing whiteness, and then looking at the history of the Black American experience, and then writing the stories, right, like he did in Blood Done Sign My Name. I know most recently there have been others who have, when you write outside of your context, right? So it's like when Peter, now he's told to go, you got to go evangelize to these people. You ain't supposed to be evangelizing with, and you're going to be the writer of this story. I think that's when it gets good. Hate is an equal opportunity employer, we like to say. So anytime there's a sense of fear or threatening, if you can find somebody to scapegoat it onto, unfortunately, the human condition is apt to do that. But the Black church taught us that we're supposed to love everybody, even those who don't return that love to us. So certainly that extends to all other communities.